woke up to find Hazel next to my cold arms. She clinged onto them with a tight grip. The fire we started gave her face this orange, soft glow. I noticed something about her face while she was resting. I tried not to move to wake her up, but what I saw just caught my attention. Her cheeks had dry tears on them. I questioned what it could have been. Did she have a nightmare? Was she hugging me because she was scared and still thought I was asleep? I shook my hand a little bit to get her attention, and she jumped up a little. Huh? What? Hazel, are you okay? Yeah. Why? Well, you're crying. She patted her hand underneath her eye. Her expression morphed into confusion. She looked at me, and I could tell she was a little bit afraid and scared. And I felt a little bad for even bringing it up. I don't know why I'm crying. I don't even remember my dream. Can you try to? She nodded and closed her eyes. While her eyes were closed, she gritted her teeth, almost like remembering her head. Eventually, after a bit, her eyes opened back up. There was this man, and I could see that within her eyes, this feeling of fear came back. Like remembering opened this floodgate of terrible thoughts and dreams, all flowing through the wrinkles in her young brain. She put her hand to her thighs and told me what she saw. I was in a twisted version of our school. Like, literally twisted. Like the walls, the doorways, everything was bent. The ceiling was so far up I couldn't see it. If there was a ceiling, the lights somehow still shine down. I could hear a sort of marching and singing in the distance somewhere, and the windows had this red, fleshy glow. I don't know how to describe it, but I swear I could see flesh behind the windows. I kept walking, and when I looked down, I realized that I was wearing some sort of school uniform. We never wore uniforms, though. I don't know why I was wearing one. I kept walking until I went to a classroom, and I saw a man. This really tall man. His face, it was like it was melting. It sagged to his knees. Wait. Did he have a long coat? A hat? No eyes? Yeah, he had no eyes. His skin, it was like a lizard's. It looked scaly. He started breathing really heavily and stepped closer to me. And his breath, I could smell it, but I was dreaming. But I could smell his breath. And it was like burnt glue. And he spoke in this really, really weird voice.
What does blood look like to those who are blind? What does rot smell to those who are deaf? What do the dead hear in the ground? These are things never taught to the children of jesters.
What?
Do you know why your world has faded away?
No. Do you? Can you tell me how we can get out of here?
A fairy took you in your sleep. It took you through a purple fog and landed in a dock here. That dock was your bed. The man who took you was no man, but a man all the same. He was a being that stands in front of you, but also not.
Just stop with these stupid riddles. Tell me why I'm here. Why are me and Ivy here? After that, he paused and took this long breath. It sounded like a deflating balloon. He looked and pointed to a chalkboard. I never looked at it before, but there were these scribbles of eyes, and all the eyes were looking exactly where I was standing. He began to toss more riddles at me.
You do not belong here. You are no rat. You are a light soul. The rock was tied to your knee. Who tied the knot?
Are you the one that dragged me here? What did I do? What did Ivy do?
I merely lifted the rock out of the creek, and there were two knots, tied to one The other was Ivy. I tied her knot, but someone else tied yours. Now answer me. Who dragged you into this?
He began to laugh in this horrid tone. It was so loud. There was a ringing that began to just start blasting in my ears, and I swore the room looked like it was breathing. And he just kept laughing, and I yelled at him. I tried yelling at him. Shut up, you bugger freak! Why did you do this? Why did you do this to us?
Your grave will be full of the skin of your parents.
I started crying, and I... Hazel had finished her story and began to just start crying. Her dried tears from earlier made more sense, and while I worried about her, I couldn't help but get those riddles that the ferryman had said to her out of my head. I picked up a rock with 2 stones. Someone tied yours, but I tied Ivy's. What could he even mean? Is he trying to say he chose me, but Hazel got caught in the crossfire? Did something else drag her here? And that final part about how her grave will be full of the skin of her parents. I want to kill that ferryman. I want him dead. I want to kill that man, thing, whatever in God's name it is. He will pay for dragging me here and her too. But he said he didn't drag her here. It doesn't matter. I want to kill the bastard. My brain snapped out of my frustrated thoughts when I heard Hazel begin to hiccup. I wiped at her left cheek to get some tears off of her face. She grabbed my arm and looked into my eyes. Why did he take you? What did you do to deserve this? The bigger question is, why did he drag you? What dragged you? Is he maybe lying? Did he just drag you here as well and he's trying to mess with us? I mean, after all, he said he'd leave me alone if I went through that door, and here we are. Hazel went ahead and looked to the side. She never liked it when people saw her cry, even her own family and even me. She thought that she had to be a big girl and had to be tough and hide her emotions, but Dad always told her that it's okay to cry, and that being tough isn't really about crying, it's just not giving up. I looked to her and tried to repeat what Dad had always taught me. It's okay to cry, Hazel. Look around you. It's okay to cry. But that's all I've done. All I've done is cry, and I'm sick of being weak. I tried to put my hand on her face, but she pushed my hand away. She looked at me, and her pupils had shrank. She began to yell right next to my face. I just don't want to be babied by you. I leaned over and tried to whisper into her ear. Look, I'm scared too, Hazel, but it's okay. Anybody would be scared if this was happening. It's okay. You're younger than me, but I need your help just as much as you need mine. If it weren't for you, I'd be dead already. Her crying turned to sniffles. She reached to her side and grabbed her teddy bear. Her tears turned his fur into a dark brown, almost mud-like color. The blue light in the sky lit the doorway. We were just a turn away from this home's entrance. The entrance itself was a T-junction of sorts. Straight ahead was a kitchen and some stairs. To the left was a living room, and in here, the right, was a reading room, with bookshelves just coated in dust. Out of the corner of my eye, I spotted something. A tall, slender shadow walking past the front door. It moved quickly, and as it did, its boots slammed onto the dirt. Hazel's crying stopped, and she turned to me out of fear. Minus the flicker of the flame, you could hear a gnat land. Hazel grabbed her backpack and whispered to me. I saw it walk past the window. She pointed to one of the many broken windows, the same one that I spotted it through. Ivy, it's not one of those TV people. It was something else. What was it? Could you make out any features? All I could tell was that it was really tall and it had a hat. We slowly crept out and tried to get a good look at it, but it had either gone to the side of the house or ran off. Every footstep seemed to be 50 times louder now. What was once just a normal creak of the woods seemed deafening. Hazel whispered to me, Let's move faster, it might hurt us. Not wanting to risk it, we ran across the street and crawled under a torn fence in a neighboring house. I swore I felt some sharp bits of wood stab through my own rucksack, but I jumped and almost stabbed myself when I heard Hazel scream, "Ivy, it's coming this way!" I didn't bother turning around, I just tried to crawl faster. I crawled and tossed and turned myself through the hole until I finally was able to wedge through. I almost thought I was going to fall back down, face first. Hazel crept through much easier than me due to her height, and we ran through the backyard. I turned around very fast and got a quick look at the thing. I only saw it for a split second, but it was tall, had a hat, and this casual walk. We reached the other side of the yard, but the fence had no holes. Hazel turned to me crying and shaking. "Ivy, what do we do?" I don't know. I crouched down and held on to her. I probably busted one of her eardrums the way I screamed. "I won't let it hurt you." We waited and waited, but nothing happened. We looked up and looked at the tall man, and my quick glance didn't catch much, because I didn't notice his giant backpack or his twisted face. He was disturbingly tall. He towered almost over this one-story house. He had a large farmer's hat, and his left eye and mouth were stitched shut. He wore a large backpack that almost went to his waist. It looked like it was pieced together by multiple backpacks. His clothes looked stitched together too, like it was 7 people's clothes stitched into one, probably to fit him in his impossible height. His only eye had a silky blue pupil, and his face was lined with wrinkles and small stitches. Combined with his hat and the stitches all over him and his clothes, he looked almost like a scarecrow. He made a little hum noise with his wide, grinning smile. His voice didn't sound scary, but almost cute, like he was a baby trying to talk. He put his long, bony fingers on my arms, then pointed to his huge backpack. He then threw his backpack over one of his arms. It was shocking the fact his arm could even support the weight. It sounded like it contained 50 pounds of metal within it. I turned to Hazel, and she had this small little grin of sorts. The scarecrow-like man pulled out 2 pieces of cloth, and then he tightly tugged on my coat and pointed to himself. Hazel turned to me with this bright, colorful joy in her eyes. "I think he wants to stitch new arms on your hoodie? But I only have those stupid pajamas under this. It'd be embarrassing. Aren't your arms cold all the time?" "Yeah, they are, but... The tall man made a giggle and then pointed to me and back it to himself. I felt my ears get warm, but I did as he asked. I took off my coat, and the only thing under it was my dumb pajamas I hated. Right before we decided to head to the city, we decided to change our pajamas. And, well, I decided to wear these ones that I had always wore before. I had also made the dumb decision of wearing the pajamas with short sleeves. I really regretted that choice. Before all of this, all the big kids at my school thought pajamas were weird or stupid. I told a friend how I still wore them, though, and she spread it around the school. Everyone called me Little Baby Ivy. The scarecrow man snapped me out of my thoughts about the past and pulled out some stitching and a needle from his pant pocket. His fingers moved so fast, it was almost mesmerizing. Within just a few seconds, he put new arms on my hoodie. Although the red fabric contrasted against the blue hoodie, it felt great. It was soft, and my arms finally felt warm for the first time in about 3 days. If time flies here anymore. He reached into his backpack one more time and pulled out a flower. He gave it to Hazel, and Hazel gasped and yanked it out of his long fingers. Thank you so much. He slowly creaked back up with his backpack, and I swore I could hear a bone crack or two. He tipped his hat like a gentleman and then made another odd hum. As he walked off, he began to hum a tune. I swore somewhere in the back of my brain I had heard that hum before. I believe my mom might have hummed it to me before when I was younger. but I never knew if she made up the hum herself, if she got it from somewhere. It just was familiar. The Scarecrow Man kept walking off, his long, bony legs taking him into the blue distance ahead. Hazel and I just looked at each other for a good bit. That was the first time anything or anyone has been nice to us since we woke up here. Hazel had this grin on her face, and it felt good to see her smile after so long. I could feel a smile on my face as well, and not a fake one to try to keep her happy. A real smile. Maybe there's other friendly creatures out there? I prayed in the back of my head that maybe we'd either meet him again, or another creature that was nice. But with my arms warm, Hazel's flower close to her chest, we strolled along into the countryside. What took Dad's old car a few seconds took us a few minutes. What took 10 minutes of walking took an hour. Hills were hikes, and hikes were impossible. To our right was a train track we followed. To our left was open farm fields and plain grass. To our center was the empty and abandoned road. A few cars stood like rocks in the fields. Bits of grass grew from tires and slowly crept under the car like long, bony green fingers. One car had its door open and a few bottles of water, so we grabbed them. The brand looked like one our uncle used to use before he died. We kept creeping through the roads till the trees blocked our right side of our view. Not too long after, they blocked the left as well, and the trees blocked most of the natural sunlight, or whatever was shining light down. Crows circled above us like strange, twisted vultures. They cried out, and their echoes went through the countryside for miles. Hazel decided to grab onto my arm, probably out of fear. The feeling of not feeling her clothes, but my own touching my skin shocked me for a second. Are the birds gonna hurt us? No, we'll be okay. They're just crows. I doubt they want to eat us. Okay. Can we rest somewhere? I think I can see an old country house up ahead. Let's stop there. We walked for another mile, or however long it was. A few feet felt like a mile to our small stature. The front yard was this almost jungle. The grass towered over us. Ladybugs and butterflies were hiding, and they were as big as our hands. We crept through until we reached the main pathway. Its stone pattern contrasted with this dead grass. A cold wind hit us from the west as we walked near. I turned back to the west and I looked at the sky. That weird whirl in the distance of that tower was still visible. Hazel tapped my shoulder. I feel it too. I think the tower is making the wind. It almost feels like it's breathing. Breathing. Yeah, the wind hits us for a minute or two, then it stops, then it hits us again, almost like it's catching its breath. I noticed it back at the zoo, did you? No, but breathing, I don't know about that. But then what's making the wind take so long? I don't know, do you think I know? Jeez, just asking. I kind of felt bad yelling at her, but I also knew it was the least of my concerns. We crept in and saw one of those TV people. I could see the side of its face. It was one of them where their face consisted of a hole with wrinkles leading into it. The person themselves was some young lady with a dark brown sweater and long black sweatpants. Her hair was brown and went to her waist, and I could see bits of dandruff that stuck out like a sore thumb in it. The house itself was old school, looked like any pre-Third War home. Even had a fireplace, which no one uses anymore. The walls seemed to have a mold form at the top that was trying its best to creep down and spread to the ground. The furniture looked like it had rotted a long time ago. The couch seemed to be leaning in its middle, making it almost look like a slide. The couch was dark red, and the table next to it was just on the verge of collapsing. We crept into the kitchen looking for any good food, but sadly we only found one good can of soup. In the kitchen itself, the window was shattered and let the cold wind creep in like an invisible smoke. And my ears suddenly just now picked up the eerie tone of the TV. The song just felt strange. It helped make the silence less loud, but made me miss it. Hazel tapped my shoulder and I jumped for a second. I turned around and Hazel had a guilty look on her face for making me jump. Ivy, I don't feel safe staying here, she said this while pointing to the lady staring at the TV. I tried to pat her shoulder as a way to comfort her. Remember the arbors next door when we tried talking to them and they were the TV zombie people? I mean, they didn't do anything when we were bawling our eyes out. What makes you think that this lady's gonna do anything? We're safe. I know, but the lights are flickering. I'm scared the power's gonna go out, and we don't know what those things do when there's no TV. She actually made a good point. We'd never seen what happens when their TV is taken away. Last time we saw something not glued to the TV, well, it tried to kill us. So it wasn't too far of a guess to assume that if there's no TV, then we're not breathing. We tried searching the rooms and didn't find anything interesting. We found dusty furniture, books. The most interesting sight was a broken TV sitting inside of a washing machine upstairs. But that was the only thing of note. We slowly crept out and walked a bit further. We saw a barn that was about a good, I'd say 40-minute walk away with our height. To our left were more open fields, 2 large corn mills, and to our right was the railway we followed next to a cornfield. The barn up ahead seemed to have this almost scarlet red color, with black bits of fallen paint making this almost camo pattern. As we got near the barn's door, this horrid smell crept into our noses. It smelled horrid, and Hazel let out a gag of disgust. What is that? Did the animals die in there? I peeked my head in, and the answer was yes. There were dead pigs and horses lying still. Their ribs and some of their muscles now shone for the world to see. And I could see some of the bone in their head. I threw my head back and did my best to hold in my puke, but it came out. The yellowish brown vomit hit the dirt and turned it into this puke canvas. The painting my guts had made had no shape, and I couldn't think of any shape it resembled. Although Hazel was the only thing near me that was alive, I felt like a million eyes were staring at me as I puked. I finally stopped and looked back at Hazel. There's no way I'm sleeping in there. There has to be a house nearby. Hazel's eyes scanned the countryside and looked behind the barn, and her eyes caught something and her face lit up. I can see a house this way. It's a sort of long walk, but not too long. I can even see some lights on in it. I did my best to let out a grin of joy, but I knew it wasn't good. Hazel began to speak again as I peeled myself off the barn wall like a band-aid. I know we should go there, but Ivy, my feet really hurt. We've been walking for a really long time now. Can we rest for just a little bit? Sure, I could use a break. I just threw up. We laid on the grass and just stared into the sky. Our backpacks now served as pillows to avoid the rough dirt. The clouds were almost black, contrasted against the dark, dark blue sky. A few crows flew overhead and let out cries as they did. Hazel began to breathe slower and slower before letting out a yawn. If time is frozen here, why do we get tired? Well, the walking, maybe? Remember jet lag from our trip to France? I think our brains aren't used to there not being time yet. Why is the sky sort of stuck? Like it won't move, but the clouds do. That's really what you're curious about in this place? We have monsters all around us. Well, if Santa, the Tooth Fairy, and the Easter Bunny are real, then monsters can be too. I chuckled and made sure not to break her little heart. But Ivy, time's natural or whatever, right? How can it be affected? Well, you know that weird place you were in, that distorted school? Yeah. Her voice had this hint of sadness, and I felt bad for even bringing that back up. Well, I had something similar before I came here. I was in this large, ocean-like place, and the water was dark, and that ferryman was there. He took me to a room full of flesh and eyes, and now I'm here with you. Were you in somewhere like that before you ended up here? Not that I can remember. I just woke up and the room looked dirty, so I went to go ask Mom and Dad what was wrong, and, well, time didn't seem to exist there, so I doubt it works here either. Hazel just nodded and kept her eyes glued to the sky. The wind of the tower that was now south of us was still just barely hitting us, pushing my hair and my hoodie to my head. The only sounds were crickets, birds, wind, and Hazel's just barely audible snoring. I let out a little chuckle knowing she was finally asleep. Something about her being able to rest made me feel happy. I leaned up and looked around to make sure that she could sleep in peace. The silhouettes of trees contrasted against the eerie blue sky. The sky wasn't dark, but it didn't feel like daytime. Like time was frozen in midday. Trees swayed and grass turned. Flowers reached for a sun that would never shine. Most of the grass had this brown hue to it. It was likely dead from the lack of sun. I looked over and I could see that behind that barn was the house she mentioned. It was more of a good 20-minute walk away, but to her little brain it probably felt longer. It was our next spot, but I wanted to let Hazel rest more. I laid back my arm and fell asleep myself. I don't know for how long, but I was woken up when Hazel tapped my arm, and I immediately noticed fear in her voice. Ivy, are you okay? Yeah, why? Just making sure. Hazel, what's wrong? Nothing. You're not very good at hiding it. What's wrong? She paused and looked at the dirt, almost like she was hoping the earth itself could somehow give her the answer she wanted. I thought about something and it made me feel really sad. What were you thinking about? What if there's no normal adults left? Well, it just scares me. I want to have a mom and dad again. Even if it's not our original mom and dad, I want a mom and dad. I felt like she might start to cry again, so I placed my hand on her cheek. Hey, look, I understand that fear. I thought about it a few times too. We can't just give up and lay around until something kills us. We gotta at least try. I did my best to hide my bubbling fear. I'd never even thought about what Hazel said. What if there is no adults left? What if it's just us kids? We know other kids are around, although they're either dead or just too far from us to see them. I could feel my heart beat faster. I could feel sweat start to form on my forehead. I felt scared and nervous, and Hazel was luckily too scared herself to notice. Ivy, if we do get new parents, what do you think they'll be like? I'd like to think they'll be kind. They'll let us stay up late, they'll cook us really good food, they'll read you bedtime stories, they'll give us really cool dolls and toys. Maybe they'll even let us watch scary movies, all the things Mom and Dad would never let us do. I'd just like to think they'll be a better version of our Mom and Dad. Hazel's frown of fear slowly twisted into a grin of glee. She wiped her eyes a little and unzipped her backpack. She pulled out Mr. Teddy and talked to him. Did you hear that? We'll get to stay up late. Hooray! She did her little hooray in a deeper voice to try to mimic her stuffed friend, all the while lifting his little flabby brown arms around and moving them left and right. I let out a chuckle. It felt nice to see her happy. Even though I felt happy, I still had that damned question that Hazel was asking reverberating in my head. What if there's no normal adults left? It kept reverberating so loud I thought I might go deaf. I hated that there was no real proof of normal adults. All the adults we've seen are either those TV zombies, or in the case of the zookeeper and the scarecrow, so distorted they're nowhere near a person. The closest thing to a human was those dead kids at the zoo. What if everyone was distorted and somehow kids just weren't affected? This world seemed to be like ours, but just distorted. Did we travel further in time? Did we get taken to another realm? Is this real or just a dream? I bit my nails in a nervous fear. Not a shivering, screaming kind of fear. A quiet and subtle fear that was slowly building. Hazel let out a yawn and snapped me out of my mental state. She dragged herself up and looked at me. I can see the house that way behind the barn. You want to go rest there? Sure. And so we began our long trek over. After way too long, we had finally reached the entrance. To the left of the house was a cornfield. To its right was the starting line of some woods. The door was cracked open just enough for us to barely sneak in, and I was almost immediately caught off guard. The house was clean, not spotless by any means, but it wasn't abandoned. There was some junk on the floor. The place was a little dusty, and the TV in the living room was on, but there was no TV zombie person. The couch faced away from a kitchen where a sickly yellow light fought to stay on. The TV served as a light for the room, only letting the corners stay dark. The curtains that they had set up blocked almost all of the natural light from getting in, and it had to sneak in through a little crack. From the kitchen came a strange sound. It sounded like one of those laughing tracks from one of those weird shows Mom and Dad would watch that me and Hazel thought were boring. Hazel tapped my arm and pointed to the doorway of the kitchen. I heard it in there, and said there was the back of a person. All I could see was it was a man in overalls. His shirt had one of those little lumberjack patterns. His hair was somewhere between a mullet and a normal haircut. Somewhere near him was another laugh. Another person walked up to the man. It was a lady. She had a long skirt that went to her knees. The two of them looked out the window where the sickly blue sky made it look like they were staring into an aquarium. They kept letting out their strange laughs. Me and Hazel looked at each other, having the same question. Why are they making noises like that and not watching the TV? The man began to slowly turn around as we ran to the front of the couch where it faced the TV. The glow of the TV shined on our backs as we sat in paralyzed fear. I peeked my head out to see what the two were doing and caught a glimpse of their faces. The man had fully turned around and I could see his full face. And it was not at all like the other people glued to the TVs. Instead of holes or wrinkles, his face had about 4 mouths covering it, each one letting out a slightly audible static. The lady turned around and her face had 3 mouths just all over it. The man went up to his front door and shut it, and I felt my heart sank. He just made our only way out impossible to escape. The two of them turned over to each other, their mouths screeching distorted laugh tracks. Hazel suddenly whispered into my ear, "What do we do?" "I don't know. Shut the hell up. They might hear us." I looked up and the two were kissing. It was more of an attempt at it than anything. The two tried to stick their tongues into each other's mouths. The lady's tongue near the top of her head trying to kiss one at the bottom of the man's face. His said bottom mouth trying to tongue its way over to the middle mouth of the lady's face. It was this strange swirl and mess of tongue and teeth. But it made me realize that these aren't normal TV zombies, but something more smarter? They aren't glued to the broadcast. Their home was oddly clean. They could function. But as if they were safe to be near, I didn't want to test that. After their horrid attempt at a kiss, they walked to the couch from the right. Me and Hazel quickly crawled around the left side and watched what they did. They just sat on the couch and stared at the TV, but they didn't seem glued to it. They turned their heads every now and then, moved their hands while talking. I assumed it was talking. They seemed to be the closest thing to normal we'd seen in a long time. Hazel turned to me and whispered, Ivy, I'm really scared. Shh, I know, I am too. Stop acting like you're alone in this. She made a little bit of an angry face at me before looking away. Her look of anger kind of shocked me for a bit. But eventually, the couple caught our attention when they got up and went to the kitchen. As they entered, a sort of beeping alarm went off. The lady turned it off and threw on oven mitts and pulled out some kind of cooked meat out of the stove. It wasn't chicken, lamb, or beef. It was just some kind of meat. The two sat at a kitchen table and began to eat, and I could feel my mouth get wet. They definitely had food. Hazel, if they go to another room, Let's try to sneak some of that food out. Are you crazy? What if they catch us? We'll just wait for them to finish eating and eat the leftovers, okay? Even if the food was a meat I didn't recognize, it looked so much better than the canned crap that we've been eating. It looked so much better than the canned beans and peaches and peas that we've been eating. Watching them eat wasn't a pretty sight. They crammed food into every mouth. They seemed to mainly cram it into the lower mouth, so I guess they know where their mouth was meant to be. It felt so long watching them eat. I swear they knew we were there and were just eating to mock me and to be jerks. Every bite they took into their meat, it made me get more hungry. I just wanted to eat whatever they were eating. I had eaten proper food God knows how long at this point. I watched the clock and they ate for 20 minutes. They finally sat up and went to a room near the kitchen, probably a bathroom or bedroom, and shut a door. And their laughing turned into a muffled moan. I snuck in, Hazel standing by the door. I climbed my way up from the chair to the table and looked at the meat. It looked like it had to taste good. I looked back up and waved my hand to Hazel. She shyly walked across like a wounded dog and slowly crawled up. By the time she crawled up, my fingers had already dug into whatever their meal was. It tasted... It's hard to describe what it tasted like. It somehow tasted a little sour, but also like honey. It's hard to describe. I looked up and saw Hazel began to dig into it too. Her face had slight bits of cooked meat stuck to it, and I figured I probably did as well. She looked to the right of the meat, a direction I didn't think to look, and she dropped her piece of meat she was holding, and her jaw dropped, and her eyes shrank. Hazel, are you okay? This is a cooked raccoon. I looked over, not thinking to do so before. I realized that what at first I thought was just a tail that I didn't even bother looking at. But when I crept further, it was the remains of a raccoon's face, bits of bone visible on its skull where they tore its skin to eat it. I could hear my stomach gurgle and I threw up. The puke was loud against the tile floor, making a loud splash. As I was puking, Hazel's gag reflex triggered, and she puked too. The once muffled laugh slowly grew and grew louder, and we realized they probably heard us. Me and Hazel, both still dizzy, turned to each other. We need to go. I slowly leapt down and we ran to the front door. As we ran, the laughter kept getting louder. We did our little trick and gimmick we'd always done. Hazel's foot to my hands to the air, her hands to the doorknob, her arms swinging and the legs swinging as the door creaked open. As the door opened, it creaked loudly like a cry for WD-40. As the door slowly creaked open, the laugh stopped. I turned over, and I froze. The man and the woman were standing over us and twitching. Hazel leapt down, and I yanked her hand. As we ran, the laughter started again, but it sounded angry and violent. Our feet made little pitter-patters as the man's footsteps made large thuds. More thuds joined in, and I assumed it was the lady. I dragged us into the cornfield. I stopped in place and gestured for Hazel to stand still. The man ran right past us. His mouth was bellowing a horrid laugh, and I swear I could smell his breath. He was so close. Hazel was hyperventilating, and I tried to hug her to calm her down. Shh. Are we gonna die? No, just don't make noise. Slow down your breathing. The lady crept by, her laugh hurting our ears. I covered my ears and winced in pain. It was just so damn loud. She eventually kept walking and went beyond where we were, but the man got closer. The two seemed to try to watch over sections to find us, or cover one end and the other person would cover the other. I whispered to Hazel, "We have to be quiet. You understand?" Yeah. Listen like the zookeeper. They can hear. Okay, I get it. Just lead the way already. I felt a little angry at her for talking like that to me, being so pushy. I grabbed her hand tighter than normal out of anger, not even realizing what I was doing. Ow, that hurts. You're hurting my hand. Stop whining. It hurts. Stop. I kept ignoring her, my mind trying to just ignore her whispered cries. Eventually, I felt something sharp hit my hand. Hazel bit me. Ah! What the heck? You were hurting me. Well, you didn't need to... The man and woman caught up with us and finally found us again. We ran again, the couple's footsteps sounding so close it made me think they could grab us. We ran to the woods outside of the field, the couple still giving chase. Hazel spotted an open log that was lying on the ground. There! Hide there! We crawled in and the man's hand was trying to grab me on the left, the lady trying to grab Hazel from the right. And it made me realize that we were stuck here. We had no way out. Both paths are blocked by their long, bony fingers, both having a dangerous person on each end. I began to cry, and Hazel did too. And my ears at this point were just drowning in sound. Our crying, the laughing, the sound of their fingers scraping the wood. My ears just couldn't breathe. The two kept trying to grab us more and more. I swear I thought one of them was going to rip their fingernails off. And all seemed hopeless, but suddenly a more deafening sound beyond even their laughs broke out. The sound of a shotgun shot rang out. It made my ears ring. It was so loud. The lady stopped moving, and the man seemed to get up and let out a loud, almost distorted scream. His footsteps seemingly ran to the source, but another deafening shot rang out. And a muffled breathing came closer. And from Hazel's side, the lady's body was dragged away. A spotlight of sorts was shining on her as she was dragged. We waited for the dragging sound to quiet down, and we looked outside. There sat a man with some sort of burlap sack on his head, similar to how Hazel used a bag for her hoodie. He had an old-timey hat, and his breathing sounded tired. Off in the distance was a truck that must have just arrived, because we never saw it before. It looked like something they had used before even the Second War. He threw the lady into the back of the truck, making a loud thud. The man with the sack on his head came back for the dead man, throwing his corpse right next to the lady's. Before the man went to the driver's seat, he fired 2 shells into his shotgun and fired twice in the direction of the tower, before angrily grunting and heading to his truck. His truck sounded like a dying pig as it started. He drove off and the squeal of the car slowly grew more and more faint. And next thing I knew, Hazel began to cry again loudly, but not from what just happened. I want to wake up. I know, I do too. But Don't say we'll find new parents. Look around you. No one is normal. But what if there is normal people? We can't just give up. I can't live like this. She fell to her knees and cried in the dirt. Her nose was leaking snot and her eyes were rivers flowing onto the brown grass. I want to have Mom hug me and tell me I'll be okay. I want to wake up. I want Dad to tell me he'll fight the monsters. I want Dad to tell me he'll save me. And you. I want to wake up. Why won't I wake up? I ran up to her and bent down on one knee. I wrapped my arms around her and pulled her to me. Shh. Just calm down. What we're calming down to? We're stuck in a... She fell back onto the dirt and began to cry even harder. I could feel my own voice begin to shake while trying to comfort her. Look at me, Hazel. Hazel, even if there's no adults left, we can't just give up. If we get up, we'll let those monsters win. They'll hurt us, kill us, maybe even eat us for all we know. But if there are adults, or some way out of here, we'll find it one day. But we can't just give up. If we give up, we're making that damn ferryman happy. Hazel's eyes seemed to have a small spark relight in them. Her voice, still shaking and crying, spoke. How long will it take? Well, I wish I knew, but one day we will find a way out. I know it. The next thing I knew, she ran up to me, nearly knocking me over and making me lose my balance. She dug her arms deep into my hoodie and buried her face in my chest. Baby, please, just don't. My worst fear is just losing you. I won't go away anytime soon. I'll be right by your side." I began to feel myself cry too, and I just hugged her. And as we hugged, for a split second, I felt like the world around us wasn't so bad. We walked for a long time, up until we found a small trailer park near the west. I would occasionally lift up Hazel and she would peek into the trailers, and every time she would see those mouth people. Not those TV zombies, just those mouth people. We finally found one that was empty and snuck in through an open window. We used small clothes, old small pieces of fallen ceiling, and pieces of rotten wood to start a fire. The fire was close to the wall, and we both casted a long, tall shadow. We both sat near the fire, my back against the wall, not even minding the bits of dry paint. Hazel rested her shoulder on my left arm. Hazel, half asleep, asked me, "What do you think the ferryman wants?" I don't know. I wish I knew. A sudden noise came from the room that we came from. We ran into the nearby kitchen and hid behind the kitchen island. But as the footsteps got louder, a humming I knew began to become audible. It was that scarecrow man. He noticed us and waved, and Hazel ran up and hugged his ankle. He let out a cheerful hum. He waved for me to move, and he set his backpack down. It made a loud thud. He pulled out 3 little items: a small flashlight, 4 batteries, and a small little blanket he seemingly made himself. He pointed to me and waved for me to come over. I went up, and he bent down and patted my head. He waved goodbye and walked out of the trailer through the front door, and leaving it cracked for us. It felt good to know that even if there's no adults, there's at least some creatures. Some kind creatures who seem to have escaped that broadcast.